As our scientific abilities continue to advance, it is becoming possible to erase traumatic memories from our brains. Some believe this has great potential to help, but others, however, who see some ethical challenges with this. Joining me now to talk about it is Dr. Jeff Zweerink. He's an astrophysicist and a senior research scholar with Reasons to Believe. It's an organization which combines science together with faith. Jeff, welcome to BCN.
Enjoy being here. Thanks for the invitation.
You bet. Is it actually possible now to wipe out traumatic memories with technology? And how does that process actually work?
Well, as I understand it, it's not possible to actually wipe out the memory, although we do seem to have the capacity to kind of remove some of the physiological effects. So, for example, if you had a traumatic memory and now you have trouble seeing dogs, if you will, or when dogs come around, you get anxious and very disturbed, you can actually do things to eliminate the response to that, even though you can't wipe out the memory of the traumatic experience with the dog.
Could this possibly help someone who's been sexually abused as a child in the past, or perhaps someone who was traumatized by a terrible car accident?
That, I think, is one of the very interesting outcomes of this research, is that it does look like we can actually help people who've been in traumatic experiences and those traumatic experiences drive a lot of how their body responds to things, that we can actually help them dissociate the traumatic response and to be able to live a more healthy, more functional life that isn't driven by the traumatic experience.
Now, we form memories each and every day, Jeff, and I would venture to guess that these memories actually create part of our identity, our personality. So why do we really want to mess with them?
You know, that's a really good question, and I think we ought to be incredibly careful about how we do this, because how our mind works and what we think, it's a very complicated process and system, if you will. And so we do want to be very careful about how we go in and manipulate it, because we actually could cause a lot of unwanted side effects if we're not very careful how we do that.
Now, do memories help us decide what is morally right and what's wrong?
I think the standard or a moral code helps us decide what's right or wrong, but certainly our memories play into that because, you know, anytime I'm deciding right or wrong, I don't want to go have to look up a book and remember the code. I actually have it in my mind so that I can remember it. And so if we want to make sure that we don't hinder our ability to recall things so that we can make those decisions in the moment rather than having to always go look things up, if you will.
Erasing a horrible abuse experience is one thing. But would people then use this to erase an embarrassing moment? Let's say they did something at a Christmas party that they're really not proud of?
I can't see that wouldn't be done. You know, this seems like a technology that has great potential, but any technology that has great potential for good can also be used for detrimental purposes. And so if you can erase the bad effects of a traumatic experience in the past, you can also erase the inhibitions that would come from having done something embarrassing, so that even though you remember the event, you wouldn't be embarrassed by it, if you will.
So what are some of the other potential drawbacks, as you see them, to erasing bad memories?
I think there's just a part of this that we need to be careful when we're working with a very complicated system. You know, I do a lot of work on cars and other things, and I can imagine driving my car down the road and you know, something happens and now there's something flapping inside the car and it's making a really annoying noise. And I could just take a very simplistic approach of saying, oh, let's just go remove that bolt and throw it away. It's rattling around. Well, that bolt probably did something else. And so if I don't fix it right, I'm going to cause other problems. And so that's what I see tinkering with memory. We've got to be very careful that we might be able to do something very good to help people that have very traumatic experiences. And I think that would be beneficial. But if we're just kind of tinkering around with people in kind of the ordinary aspects of life, we could very easily introduce some unwanted effects. And those are going to be very hard to predict ahead of time, simply because the human mind is such a complicated piece of equipment.
Do our traumatic memories maybe serve us in any way? In other words, do we need negative experiences to really learn from them?
It really does seem that. I know a lot of how I behave in a situation is informed by how things have happened in the past. There are things that I just instinctively, it's like my body responds and says, oh, be cautious, be careful here. And so what's happened in the past helps me navigate in the moment of the day, because what there's kind of this idea that, well, I'll just kind of think logically and work through everything. And the reality of it is I don't have time to do all that in the moment. And so those past experiences where, hey, this worked well, ooh, this worked poorly, inform me and allow me to make those decisions that I'm confronted with each and every day. And I have to make a decision on the spur of the moment.
So how do we really learn from a bad relationship if we can't even remember it? I'm thinking we're going to be repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
Well, I think that's right. I'm kind of reminded of what the Bible says, that the Bible encourages us to think on the things that are honorable and true and pure and right, because as we do that, we're reinforcing that that's the way we're going to behave in the future. So if we don't have those bad memories, we can't learn from them to avoid them in the future. In the same way that having good experiences help inform us and make good choices in the future. And so I think we just want to be very careful about trying to remove memories. And I will make this comment. As of right now, I'm not aware of any ability to remove the memories are there. What we can do is dissociate some of the physiological effects of, say I'm terrified of spiders. I can remove the physiological fight or flight response that comes with that so that I can make a more informed decision, so that I can think and behave rationally in the moment. I can't actually get rid of the traumatic memory. It's still there. It's just how does it influence me in this particular instance?
Do we really need the past to give us proper perspective on the present? What are your thoughts?
I think the past is an incredibly important thing. It does help us understand what's going on in the moment. And with memories, again, I think there's this tendency to think of just the memory and that's all that's important. But there's a whole lot that goes into the memory. There's how your body responds. Did you think about it well? Did you think about it poorly? Have you gone back and rethought about it in light of the truth? All of those past things inform what I do each and every moment of every day. And so I think going in and tinkering with our memories and how we respond to them can have a lot of impact, unwanted or unintentional consequences of what may go on in my decision making each and every moment of each and every day.
I heard that there were some scientists who believe that our memories are often interlocked, one memory together with other ones. So maybe potentially erasing one bad memory, would that affect some of the other ones?
I don't see how it couldn't. Again, our minds are very complicated, and what's going on in the brain when you have a memory is that there's new connections being formed, but those connections are connected to other things. And so if we're trying to destroy one connection or remove one memory, that's going to take those connections away, but that's going to have consequences throughout the brain. And again, a lot of the consequences of that we may not be able to predict ahead of time.
Apparently, even though a memory could potentially be erased, our subconsciousness will still retain the emotions that come along with that bad memory, only now the context of those negative emotions are not there. Do you see that as potentially being problematic?
Yes, it is, because if you've now separated the emotions from the physiological response or the emotions from the event itself, you've got these emotions floating around, but you have no context for being able to process them. I know some people know how to process emotions real well. I struggle with that. And a lot of what helps me process the emotions is being able to think through, remember the events, analyze what happened, and think rightly about it. Well, now if those are separated, I now have no longer any good way of processing those emotions to help them keep from driving my life and make and influence decisions, future decisions, in a detrimental way.
Now, considering that there's so much we do not yet know about how our memory works, is it best to not play God and just learn to cope with traumatic memories?
I think we need to be very careful. And I think to the extent you can cope with traumatic memories using just the tools, like I said, that the Bible talks about, thinking about what's true and honorable and right and pure and lovely, that would be ideal. But what I do see the advantage of this is that sometimes, as try as I may, my head hurts and I can't get rid of it. And so I take aspirin. That helps me deal with the pain so that I can do things appropriately or properly. Well, I do think this sort of therapy would help people who are just paralyzed or unduly burdened by traumatic experiences. It will help them get past the traumatic experience so that they can deal with things in a more healthy way. And I think that's a good benefit, but we need to be careful about using it and thinking it's a miracle cure for every bad experience we've ever had.
Where do you think this field of science will actually go over the next 10 or 20 years?
I'm thinking it will help us understand how the mind actually works. Again, it's a very complicated process of how we think. What does consciousness mean? How do we understand past events? How do we think about future events? How do we feel? And how does that all integrate together? The more we can understand how that works, the more we can actually use that information to help and benefit people. So rather than kind of having it be a black box where I know if I put this little drug in, it does this, the more we understand that process, the better we're going to be able to use it to help people who desperately need the help.
You know, I'm kind of thinking at the same time, instead of removing some of those potential memories, how about implanting some fake memories, like Total Recall, that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, redone, I think, with Colin Farrell. How about we plant in a memory of I was in a tropical vacation somewhere, you know, instead of actually paying the big bucks to go there?
Well, yeah, it does seem like there's some capacity to do that. And people who've been involved in this research can show that you can actually convince people they were involved in committing a crime that they didn't actually commit. And so there are techniques and processes, even without using the drugs, brain function inhibiting drugs, that you can use to do that. And so we'd like to think, oh, if I just have all these memories of idyllic environments, that'll be great. But the reality of it is you've got these memories that aren't connected with what actually happened. And anytime we obscure the way things really work, that often works to our detriment. And so while it may seem like it'd be great and a good time, again, that's almost certainly going to have negative consequences later.
Dr. Jeff Zweerink is an astrophysicist and a senior researcher scholar with Reasons to Believe. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.